Hi, my name is Fleming Shi, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Barracuda Networks. In this HelpNet security video, I'll be talking about the rise of attacks on critical infrastructure. Barracuda recently released our 2022 Threat Spotlight on ransomware attacks, where we analyzed about 106 highly publicized attacks between August 2021 and July 2022. Our research found an increase in attacks across all the most targeted industries or organizations, which include education, municipalities, healthcare, and financial. While attacks on critical infrastructure in particular have quadrupled, with ransomware attacks quadrupling across critical infrastructure targets, it's clear the goal of these cyber attacks is now less about pure financial gain and more about disruption, damage, and creating chaos beyond the immediate victims. It also shows how vulnerable we all are to potential nation-state sponsored cyber attacks, as those are the threat actors most likely to be going after infrastructure targets. The good news is that while attacks have increased, and fewer victims are actually paying ransom, and more organizations and businesses are standing firm, thanks to better defense and better response, especially in attacks on critical infrastructure. I feel like it's like a wake-up call for the authorities and the general public, and pushing the authorities to actually take action, working with the victims, resulting in actually more ransomware payment recovery, and sometimes making arrests of the cyber criminals. Additionally, the agreements between different nation state and government leaders have created a collaborative environment for cracking down on these crimes. Even their adversary in the geopolitical environment, they can agree to critical infrastructure should be off limits. That's really positive in some way. There are also things that we talked about in the past where, some basic things they should have for preventing or basically recovering from ransomware attacks. But today I will talk about 5 of the things that's kind of fresh on my mind. Recently, you have heard Microsoft is going to, by default, disable macros. Macros is it's actually an active component of Office documents, and it could be weaponized against your users, right? And which can be running scripts behind the scene. And Microsoft is taking the first step to actually making it by default disabling those macros. So you should also look into make sure it's done correctly or proactively disabling macros if you don't need them. And also, we talk about network segmentation. Implement a robust network segmentation so that will help reduce the spread of ransomware if they ever get into your systems. And it's also important to think about network segmentation is not where you stop. There's another concept of micro-segmentation, which takes you to zero trust-based access, where you can reduce the attack surface for the attackers, right? And also investigate all the software that's running on the desktops, the servers, the laptops, and wherever, the devices. If it's unused or unauthorized, you should remove them. And pay attention to those remote monitoring tools and remote access tools, because if you don't need them, you should disable it. Sometimes you can find a sign of compromise when you see someone on your system, right? The fourth one I would say is that protect your web applications as well as your application programming interfaces, what we call APIs, because those are outward facing to the public. You need to prevent DDoS. You need to prevent intrusion through vulnerabilities of those applications, and really pay attention to how they're accessed and whether it's bots versus real humans, right? And then lastly, we talked about having a backup. Make sure you run them, and make sure you run the recovery and test your backup. But it's also important to think about access control of your backup, because the bad guys or the attackers are always going to go after your backup asset. Doesn't matter if it's the software or the data store. So make sure you really know who is accessing that and protect it. In conclusion, while critical infrastructure is at high risk for devastating attacks as ransomware becomes more sophisticated and the global tension continues, there are preventative measures that can be taken to minimize disruption, damage, and chaos. Just to go as straightforward as possible. Protect your email. Make sure you don't have any macros that can actually cause damage through the email, as well as file shares. Doesn't have to be email borne, right? And just pay attention to that. Also, protect your web applications, APIs, as well as user interfaces, and must have a backup and must run the backup and restore procedures to test it. But meantime, also protect the access to your backup systems as well as your backup stores, the data stores. Thank you.